What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. So I'm watching the Motor Oil Geek, and he is a great dude. He knows his stuff. Um, Now he's got a Cadillac here that he has an oil life indicator at 9% on this Cadillac. It is a rental car. Rental cars, in my opinion, usually have very strict maintenance schedules. And that's why a lot of people tend to buy them from reputable companies because they are so well maintained. Not that they're all using the right fuel, because we don't know what the renter is putting in there. But I will tell you this: the rental agency is handling the maintenance, not the driver or the consumer. So I have to play devil's advocate here with this guy. The Motor Oil Geek, by leaps and bounds, knows his oil testing. And he knows the processes. He knows what to look for. He is the god of oil analysis. And I'm just going to give him kudos. But I want to say devil's advocate to him. He is testing a vehicle with 45,000 miles, 46,000 miles. It says 9% oil life left. I'm not sure if he knows what the oil is in, the oil that's in that engine. I think he's just testing what's there. And he's saying that the oil is still good. He's basing it on a 5,000 to 6,000 mile oil change, and then they want to test it further than that. And later in the conversation, he says that that oil could go longer. This is where I play devil's advocate. For the average person who maintains their car properly, who is not driving it around low on oil, not driving around overheating, this test doesn't mean a whole lot. So this is saying in the perfect conditions, the engine is in good condition, right? So I think he's missing. This is a very general video that he's produced here.
9%.
So it's at 9%. Hold on.
Take an oil sample for analysis and find out.
So 46,000 mile vehicle, rental vehicle, Cadillac. Doesn't look like it's a piece of crap. Remember that it's a rental vehicle, probably from a reputable company that's been maintained very well. They don't put junk out on the streets. So this tells me that it probably doesn't have an oil consumption problem. The filters have been maintained, not necessarily the PCV system, but this vehicle has probably been maintained well better than the average person. So now he's going to take an oil sample.
But before we get to that, how does an oil life monitoring system even work?
So now what he goes into is in the 1980s, that GM 3 engineers came up with an oil life monitoring system based on the data back then. So has it evolved? I'm not really sure. I will tell you, I don't trust data from 1980 in current model vehicles and engines, but it probably works somewhat, right? We didn't have Uber and Lyft drivers. We didn't have so many people on the road. We didn't have double injector systems. We didn't have a lot of different things. On top of, we didn't have ethanol fuels back then. So let's just keep going, right?
Is there a sensor that's testing the oil? No, there's not. But there is an intelligent algorithm that was originally developed back in the 80s by 3 engineers at GM.
Okay, so I'm going to fast forward. So what he goes on to saying is how that the oil can become contaminated with oil dilution, right? And if the engine's overheating, how it degrades the oil. How many people are driving around with overheating engines today? Probably a lot. Oil to fuel ratio talks about fuel dilution, which is way higher in today's engines, but it's less in engines that are well maintained. So let's go to here. But for every 18 degrees of Fahrenheit,
oxidation rate double.
I want to go back to that.
Temperature operation. Inversely, when you run at high engine temperatures, you see, every 18 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius for the rest of the world. Come on, America, we got to get on the metric system at some point. But for every 18 degree Fahrenheit increase in oil temperature, the oxidation rate doubles. Of course, oxidate.
Whoa, double, right? So how many people are driving out there with, hear me out, low engine oil, right? Not empty, but low, very diluted. So what happens when you run with low engine oil? The oil of the engine oil temperatures go up, contamination and wear go up. All right, so this is what he's not talking about. He is a little bit. How many people are driving around with cars overheating? Typically around 46,000 miles, you don't see an engine running low on coolant, but there are engines out there that have issues that they are low on coolant. And you figure if you're missing 10% of your cooling system capacity, it's going to raise your internal engine temperature, but not enough to sometimes affect the car. And then once it gets to a certain point, your engine will start to run hot or overheat.
Is a chemical degradation of the oil. You don't want oxidation. So the higher your oil temperature is, the more rapidly it's oxidizing, the shorter the oil life is going to be. So,
did you hear what he said? Shorter oil life from higher oil temperatures, right? And higher coolant temperatures. They go hand in hand. So if you have oil consumption, right? Oil consumption, this is your container of oil that's lubricating your vehicle. And what we're going to say, this is 4 quarts. I'm seeing oil consumption rates at 2 quarts, 50% of its cooling efficiency in oil, and people are driving around like that. So now what happens to that oil that's in the engine now, based on his math and science, and he is the expert, this guy here is the expert. So we're here 100%. Within 2,000 miles of an engine that's burning oil, right? It's doing this. It's getting hotter, it's getting hotter, it's getting hotter. Right now that you're running around with 2 quarts in your engine, that oil cannot cool like it should be, and it's becoming more contaminated at the rate of 50%. So now, right, you continue to drive that around low on oil. What is it doing? Now it's degrading even faster, and you have less in your engine. Even though the engine's really not showing signs of any issues yet, if you continue to push it past the oil life monitor, sludge, bearing failure, boom, engine blows up. If you follow that.
This intelligent algorithm that GM created is using temperature data as well as engine revolution.
Engine temperature, right? So your engine oil cools the internals. It's removing heat and debris and everything else that's moving in the engine as it's flowing through, right? It's cooling. That's why people put oil coolers in vehicles, right? So as your oil gets lower and lower and lower, right? So say this is 100%. You're at 50. You basically are working way outside the cooling temperature of that oil and antifreeze and everything else, demising the grade of the oil and the quality of the oil in your engine. And this is going on every day in today's vehicle. So this is the perfect environment in most cases is what he's discussing that they're testing.
Data, oil fuel ratio, it's factoring all that in. Then it adds in a couple of fail safes. It won't let you go more than 7,500 miles.
We're going to fast forward.
Monitoring system. My daughter's Toyota does it. Nissan.
So then he goes into talking about how many different vehicles don't have that.
9%. It's going to be somewhere in that 5,000 to 6,000 range, maybe a little bit more. But let's go ahead and see what these results say, and then we'll add.
So what he's saying here is that they're guessing between 5,000 and 6,000 miles on this oil based on the oil life indicator, an average, right? He's saying that oil they're testing at 9% has 5,000 to 6,000 miles on it. I think he's saying that this oil was a full synthetic Dexos. I'm pretty positive of that.
And an estimated mileage to see what that wear rate per 1,000 miles looks like. The first thing we see is the viscosity is right in.
So I'm going to not bore you with all this. He's saying the oil's good. Oxidation, the ad pack.
Currently, how far you can go safely. Fuel dilution, less than 1%. That's excellent. Silicon, 21 parts per million.
So the fuel dilution in this engine tells me that it doesn't have a blow-by condition yet, or it's not really bad, or doesn't have a leaky injector or things like that. It's also not saying to me that he has stuck rings because the fuel dilution will go up. Also, that oil hasn't been in the engine possibly as long as he thinks. Now we don't know that for a fact, but if your fuel dilution is low In a perfectly running engine, meaning there's no mechanical issues or wear issues, your fuel dilution will be down. If your oil has been in the engine for a while and over its extended life, your fuel dilution will go up. And, leaky injectors and bad tune-ups and everything else follow into that.
Interestingly enough, when we took that sample, there was a lot of dust and sand there under the hood. So this 21 parts per million silicon, that's not surprising. And let's look at that additive package. And this is just what we saw from the making motor oil video. This fits that.
So he's saying the motor oil add pack is where it needs to be.
Thing is single digits. It's perfect. We said before, we don't really know what the mileage is. Let's just go ahead and.
So that was at 9%, then it's at 11%. So the video is a little confusing for me, but that's okay.
Throw in, say, 6,000 miles, and let's see what that wear rate per 1,000 miles calculates out to. So at 2.7 parts per million per 1,000 miles, this is excellent. It's well below our target.
So he's saying even if they drove it longer, that oil was still testing good?
Miles is. But if you're not really worried about that, you don't even need used oil analysis. And I'm a used oil analyst telling you that. I think this is conclusive proof that you can trust the oil life indicator to tell you when it's time to do your oil change. So if you enjoy.
So this is where I play devil's advocate with this guy. Fortunate for him, he's testing a vehicle that probably hasn't lost engine oil. Okay, so if you say you can trust the oil life indicator, you can trust the oil life indicator, maybe, right? This is my point. Every vehicle needs a specific test. You cannot trust an engine life oil indicator if your engine burns oil and your engine overheats and you are using this vehicle for an excessive abuse, right? So severe service, mild service, not so mild service, right? So it's your maintenance goes by what they say is extreme service, severe service, light service, things like that. So can you trust your oil life indicator for an engine that has stuck rings, poor PCV system design, clogged air filter, engine running hotter than it's designed not to do? You are a pizza delivery driver. No, you cannot trust your oil life indicator for these types of environments. You need to know if the engine has a full capacity of oil at 6,000 miles. So I'm going to say that this test here with 6 quarts of oil at the 5,000 or 6,000 mile oil test that he was doing, that engine was full of oil, because if it wasn't full of oil, right, and we're seeing oil consumption within 5,000 miles at least 2 to 2.5 quarts low, then his fuel dilution would be higher and his tests would be way different than what they were. So he's testing an engine, in my opinion, that's been well maintained, doesn't have a blow-by condition, probably doesn't have a clogged air filter, basically a well-maintained vehicle. This is not what everyone is driving here today. Not everyone is driving a well-maintained vehicle. So you cannot trust your oil life indicator if your engine burns oil, and you need to know this. So, when he puts out content like this, I have to play devil's advocate with him. You can't tell the world that you can trust your oil life indicator, and then they do exactly what you say, and then they go another 6,000 miles on top of what you just said, and they blow their engine up because the oil geek said you can trust your oil life indicator. I'm going to tell you, you cannot. No different than the Ford 5.0 motor that I just did. Well, the oil life indicator wasn't at 0. I'm not sure what it was, but there was no oil leaks, and then I checked the oil, and it was 50% low on its oil capacity. 50% low. So remember what he said. Your oil is cooling at 100%. Now, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, right? 50%. Now that oil cannot cool the way that it used to, and now what happens at that 50%? Well, he said it doubles in its deficiencies, right? So Imagine what's happening inside your engine. Cook, 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 cook. Oh, I'm trusting my oil life indicator. Cook, 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 cook. Oh man, my engine sounds noisy, but my oil life indicator says I'm still okay. Keep driving, keep driving, keep driving. Grenade. That's what's going on, people. Thanks for watching.